Well, guys, it is time for me to answer some of your questions. You asked me questions about a week ago in your form, the Google form that I sent you, and I promised I'd get you answers. And I'm sorry it's taken this long. It shouldn't usually, but this has been a really crazy time, I think, for everybody, but especially just trying to find our feet with teaching and online teaching and all this stuff. It's kind of nuts. So I have your questions. I put them on my phone in kind of no particular order. I will put a timestamp down at the bottom so you can just look for your particular question or whatever questions interest you. And yeah, we'll just see how this goes. So here we go. First question somebody asked me was, are you doing okay with staying home even now that school is somewhat back in? And the answer is, yeah, kind of. I would say that um, school's actually helpful for me because it's given me kind of a routine, even though I'm still home at this point. Um, Over the summer, and some of you other guys ask me like, just how are you? And I mean, I appreciate that, right? Um, it's been a rough summer, honestly. Just kind of not knowing, like, there's been a lot of uncertainty about, what is this virus doing and how bad is it really? And, you know, are we going to spread it to people that we love who are even more susceptible to it than we are? And, I've got my sister to worry about. I think I told you about her and her, her brain tumor and how if she were to get sick, that would be really bad for her. And so, it's been a lot. And then there are questions about, is a vaccine going to work, and are we going to get a vaccine, and are people going to take the vaccine if we get the vaccine, and just all this mess. And then you add all the mess of a political election cycle in the middle of it, and no matter what side you're on, there's a lot of the air is just kind of crackling with this sort of tension, and then you get wildfires out there. All I'm saying is, I read the news, and maybe I read the news too much. Because you can read it and kind of freak out, and that's sort of where I am. Like I'm still like I'm a religious guy, and so I know my hope is supposed to not be in what I can see and understand, but it's really hard sometimes when you soak in a little bit too much news, and that's kind of where I've been. So yeah, school is good because it's like I can't spend a couple hours every day reading about vaccine prospects or what they think is going to happen next or when life is going to go back to normal. Um, and instead, I'm working with history, and it's stuff that I kind of know, even though the format's weird and challenging. So that's maybe too long of an answer, but that's what I tell you. The next question is related to that. It's, do you think we'll ever get back to normal again? And my answer is, yeah, I think so. And that's actually been a real concern. That's one of the things that I get kind of terrified of. Like, what if this is just life forever? And it probably isn't. There are some good reasons to believe that likely once you've had this virus, even if you get it again, your body will do a better job of responding to it. Probably, we're not 100% sure on that. A vaccine will almost certainly help with that. At least it'll make it less prevalent. I know there's a whole debate about that, but one thing you'll learn about me is I'm pretty pro-vaccine, and we can talk about that if you really want to. Um, with this one, I will say I'm not just going to get it because it's there. I want to make sure it's safe. I want to make sure it's effective. I'm not just going to be like, oh, they said it was here. So, Russia came out with a vaccine like, what was it, mid-August? And they never did all the tests on it, apparently. So I wouldn't just go let them jab me because they say it's a coronavirus vaccine. That's dumb. But yeah, I think it will get back to normal. Here's the thing, though. I think it's going to take some time, and I think there will always be some sort of residual, like, after September 11th, and we realized that terrorism could be a thing that could affect our lives. It changed our lives, and you wouldn't remember that because you're born, right then or after that. But it changed. Like, we're just a little bit more aware of stuff, and the way you get on an airplane changes because we want to make sure that we're being careful about potential terrorist attacks. And I think we're going to see the same kind of thing with this. Now, does it completely change the way that I live my life? Do I live my life every day worried that a terrorist is going to come kill me? No. And I think we'll get to a point where we're just not really thinking about the coronavirus anymore. But my guess is it's probably going to take about a year. My guess is around this time next year, we'll be in a much better spot and it'll feel pretty normal. And I would guess we're going to be back to normal school by that point. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. But that's my guess. Okay. So mid to late 2021, I think we'll see normalcy again. Until then, we're going to just have weird stuff, and it is what it is. So let's just try to make each other's lives not miserable if we can, even if they disagree with us about masks or, who to vote for or whatever. You said, I know, somebody says, I know teachers are stressed to the max, just like students are. Know that we're here for you. And I really, really appreciate that because, uh, yeah, we're really stressed. Like I just yesterday was Friday, right? So no school for you guys, sort of. It's weird. Between like 11 o'clock on Thursday night and 11 o'clock Friday morning, I got something like 43 emails, and that's a lot. And every single one of those needs a response. It's individual and careful. And I'm not just like, yes, like I want you guys to know that I care about you, and you're not just email number 27. You know what I mean? So that's a lot. Somebody says, how do you deal with stress? A couple things, honestly. So the thing that comes to mind first, even though I don't do this as much as I'd like to, which maybe that's why I'm stressed. I like video games. Like I know I'm old and whatnot, but I like a good game, especially a game. And judge me all you want. I love a good like first person shooter. Run around and shoot Nazis or something. There's something stress relieving in being like, yeah, take that Nazi. That's pretty great. I like reading. Reading just sort of takes you to a different place. Um, Especially if it's a good book. The problem is you read a couple good books in a row and then you read a bad one and you're like, I don't want to read. This is dumb. Good movies, good TV shows, hanging out with my family and playing board games is something I like to do. I'm a pretty simple dude, honestly, when it comes down to it. Normally, I'd say a good stress buster is hanging out with friends, but we're not really doing much of that. In fact, even tonight, we told somebody we can't get together with them. So, anyway, yeah. How do I like e-learning? So my answer is better than I thought I would, but I also feel like, and I would love feedback on this. I feel like I'm at an advantage because I get to treat everybody evenly and equally. If I'm back at school, which I'm thinking about doing in about a week, maybe we'll see. A lot could happen in a week. Um, I think it's going to be really weird if half of you are right in front of me and half of you are at home. Like I'm afraid that you who are at home, which on most days is more than half because we have people who are just choosing to stay home all the time, which is great. I respect that. Um, but it's I don't know how to treat everybody evenly. Like I don't know if I can do the same thing that I'm doing right now if I'm at school. And so that's a little stressful for me, honestly. And I'm kind of concerned about that, just being honest. So there you go. Man, here's a real honest question. And I love this question because it's exactly the way that I think, but I have an answer for it. So here you go. How does history help you in real life? How does knowing history benefit you in everyday life? So, y'all, this is a question that teachers ought to be able to answer for sure. And if they can't, well, I know that not all of our teachers probably could give you an answer for their subjects, but I'm going to give it a shot. Um, Y'all, 2020 is a mess. How did we get in this situation? How did we get in a situation where the federal government, the states can't agree on how to handle the coronavirus? How did we get there? How did we get to a place where we are so incredibly politically divided that if somebody says just I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat, automatically like at least a third of the people in the room hate them for what they just said or suspect I'm not going to like this guy, right? How do we get there? What are the differences between these people? And how do these people approach the world? How do they think that's different than us? Um, what are the issues that face the United States today as far as like, are my grandma and grandpa going to get their social security checks? Are you going to get a social security check when you retire? Or is that going to be something that's long gone? Um, all those things are questions that history answers. In fact, there was even a flu pandemic in 1918. And one of the big things that's crazy is that we're handling this pandemic right now similarly to the way we handled the flu pandemic in 1918, and that was a freaking train wreck. Part of the problem is that people didn't learn a lot of lessons from then, and so we repeat those things. And that's true both on a macro level, like across the country, but also individual people make some of these decisions that are the same time after time after time. And so if you don't want to make the same dumb mistakes, you got to figure this out. But it goes beyond that, right? It's questions like, how do we get to the point where we have some very segregated neighborhoods? Like a lot of you guys probably live in a neighborhood that looks an awful lot like you ethnically. Now, some of you don't. It started to change in the last 15 or 20 years. But for a long, long time, our neighborhoods are superly racially not mixed, right? How did that happen? Why do we have the race relations that we do? I mean, that's a 2020 question right there. Didn't we, solve that back in the civil rights era? No, we didn't. But y'all, all these questions, those are history questions. And you got to understand a lot of stuff to start to unravel the layers of history. And so, yeah, it's super important. I don't know. That's what I'm telling you. How do you deal with your neighbors? Why do your neighbors believe differently than you? Those are questions of history. Okay, how's my sister doing? Somebody says. So not awesome. My sister, she has some good days. She also has some really bad days. Her overall trajectory is definitely downward. Um, she'll have lots of seizures. There a couple weeks ago she had 10 seizures in one day, and they're not. These aren't the major like the body shaking seizures. There are smaller types of seizures that you can have, but it's rough. She has two little kids. They're both younger than my kids, and it's a hard situation. So I appreciate you asking, but um, maybe the question you're wondering but aren't asking, or do you know how long she's got? And the answer is not really. I mean, it could be months, it could be years, it could be weeks. Uh, we honestly don't. We don't know, and it's rough. Somebody says, "Can I see a picture of your dog in the next class or say hi?" Yeah, you know what? Maybe I'll even put a picture of my dog as a thumbnail for this video. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, I'll try to get my dog around. Let's see what we can do. Um, let's see here. Oh, okay. Here's a great question. It's a coronavirus question. How do I feel about the data, the new data the CDC put out? Well, it doesn't. The question doesn't ask specifically what data you're referring to, but I bet I can guess because this question was asked right around the time that a bunch of people were saying that the CDC said. So listen to what they said, and then I'll help you interpret it. They said that only 6% of people who died from the coronavirus, their death certificate only said coronavirus, right? So other people had pneumonia, or they had, bleeding issues, or they had kidney failure, or it was blood sugar problems. And so what a lot of people said was, see, the coronavirus really isn't all that deadly. That is, frankly, a complete misunderstanding of how death certificates work. Okay. So let's say that I have diabetes. Okay. We know that people with diabetes are at greater risk of having negative outcomes with coronavirus. So let's say that I have diabetes, and let's say I'm 80. I mean, if you're 16, 17 and have diabetes, there's a really good chance you're still going to survive. So I don't want to freak anybody out. Okay. Um, let's say I'm 70 and I've got diabetes and I go in there and the coronavirus, because of the things it does to my body, throw my blood sugar out of whack and they can't get my blood sugar fixed. Okay. They can't get it back. And I end up going into a coma and I die. Well, they're going to put on my death certificate, uh, coronavirus, COVID-19. I don't know what they'd write, but one of those things. And then they'd say diabetes. So the question is, was it diabetes that killed me or was it the coronavirus? Well, I would have lived another decade or more with diabetes if it wasn't for the coronavirus. The coronavirus is what triggered the problem that killed me. Okay. Um, the same thing happens with people that have heart issues or breathing issues like COPD or even asthma to some degree. Um, so here's the thing. If you're looking at it and you're like, man, it's only people with underlying health conditions. First of all, even that's a little bit of a misread. Um, but realize 40 to 60%, depending on what statistics you look at, of the United States has some kind of underlying health issue. I mean, even obesity is one. That's like, what, 35, 40% of Americans are considered obese. So automatically, bam, there's a big chunk. But on top of that, um, these people who are dying, even healthy people, it can cause your liver to quit working, or it can cause people who survive the coronavirus who never had diabetes before. Some of them have diabetes now because it caused it. So don't just be like, oh, I don't have diabetes, I don't have to worry about it. Neither does anybody in my family. It's still, I mean, we want to be really cautious about this thing. And I think you can be overly cautious, and maybe I'm guilty of being overly cautious. But you know what? I'd rather be overly cautious and alive a year from now than just whatever and dead. Look, I'm a super cautious dude. I'll just tell you that, and you can take that for what it's worth. Um, okay, how am I coping with online school? I think I've answered that. If Corona was gone and you could go anywhere in the world, where would it be? I have two answers, and I think I've told a lot of my classes. Um, we were supposed to go to Disney World over spring break last year, and that just happened to be when Disney World shut down. And I'm the only one in my family who's ever been to Disney World, so that's a bummer. I would love to go. In fact, we're still booked to go late October, early November. We're going to cancel that trip. It just is what it is. Um, but I would go there. But the other answer is that I would go to the Philippines because my wife hasn't. We haven't been there for almost 9 years, I think, and my wife needs to get back home. She needs to see her family. She needs to see them. My kids need to see family in the Philippines, and travel it's kind of difficult now. Like right now, if I wanted to go to the Philippines, I'd have to go and quarantine for like 14 days and or pass a COVID test. My whole family would. It's a mess. There are only like two countries in the world right now that'll let Americans in. Excuse me. I think this is still true. That'll let Americans in without any kind of test or anything. That's crazy. All right. What's been my favorite activity to do during quarantine to keep from being bored? I think I answered that sort of already. It's kind of the de-stress stuff. Same things. What's the event in history you're most excited to teach about? This answer probably changes almost every day, but I really like the Great Depression stuff into World War II because that starts to be like when America really becomes sort of identifiable, right? Where we start to say, "Oh, that looks like the America that I know and I understand." A lot of the stuff before that it just feels like even World War II feels like a long time ago, but it feels like a really long time ago when you're talking about the Civil War, the Revolutionary War. I love that stuff because all of a sudden the lights start to go on, and you've seen enough World War II movies or whatever that you start to really connect with it. And then we move from there into civil rights, which I think is great. And it's just, I mean, that's when it really, for me, starts to get rolling. Not only that, but it's usually about that point in the year that we know each other well enough that we're all super, super comfortable. I mean, we're comfortable now, but it gets better as the year goes on. So we'll see. Somebody says, what is COVID? COVID stands for coronavirus disease. Okay. Maybe you didn't know that. COVID-19 specifically is the coronavirus disease identified in 2019. It is that virus that's out there that we're all trying not to get if we can avoid it. Some of you have gotten it. Some of your families have gotten it. Most of you are okay, and that's awesome. I had somebody who told me they lost their sense of taste, and it took them like 2 months to come back. So, whew. When will I start putting in more grades? By the time you see this, you should have already seen more grades. I'm still behind, but I'm less behind. So, I'll take it. Why do I like Kermit the Frog? So, I like Kermit the Frog. When I was younger, and maybe still now, I don't know. I think less so now. When I was younger, I sounded a lot like Kermit the Frog. I think I still probably sound like a Muppet of some sort. But the deal was that you have two choices when you sound like Kermit the Frog. One is to let it really bother you and, get angry whenever people bring it up, or you can just be like, yeah, that's a thing, whatever. And that seemed like a way better option to me. Just kind of own it. Like, what's wrong? So I sound like Kermit the Frog. Who cares? Yeah. Anyway, so when I was in high school, I actually once asked out a girl, and I was like, "Hey, you want to go do I don't know, I asked her to a movie or something," and she's like, "Do I look like Miss Piggy to you?" And I mean, I should have said, "Yeah." I didn't. Missed opportunity, but you know what? It's okay. I ended up with my wife, and she ended up with who knows who, not me. So she lost out. Somebody says, will there be a study guide? And if not, what method of studying would you recommend? So we're going to talk about that a little more in the week to come because we are moving toward review for a test. I am going to give you study materials. So, yeah, and I think it's going to be completely sufficient. But if not, I'm happy to work with you. There are some websites. There's a number of multiple choice tests or questions that you can practice on. And then there's it's called Brainscape. It's an online note card program. And I think it's really, really helpful for just kind of repeating content again and again. But frankly, that aside, you should be just reading your notes again, excuse me, in the evening when you go home. You don't need to spend a lot of time on it. Just kind of look at them again and your brain will be like, oh yeah, I remember this. And that's good, right? You're making those pathways back to that information, which makes it a little bit easier by the time you get to the test. Okay. Now the test will be open note, but you still need to be familiar with the content and what it means and how it connects and all that stuff. So hang in there. And finally, somebody else says, do you believe in Emmanuel? or Jehovah. I can't remember. I forgot to write it down on the thing. I don't know. And I would say the answer is yeah, I'm a Christian. And I'm happy to talk to you about that and specifically what brand I am if you're interested. But my answer would be yes. Yes, I do. Um, hey guys, this is long. I doubt any of you watched the whole thing. If you did, you get 2 thumbs up from me. Virtual. High five, virtual. You're probably not getting a lot of those these days that are, legit. But there you go. You'll have more opportunities to ask me questions, and you can follow up on this stuff if you want to. In fact, if you really want to ask me another question, you can throw one down in the comments of this, and I'll get to it as soon as I can. All right, this is long enough. I'll see you guys real soon.